Well, welcome to the Valley Hoops Insider podcast, part of the Valley Hoops Insider website. I'm Harry Schroeder, editor of the site, host of the show, and we've got the commissioner of the Missouri Valley Conference with us today, Jeff Jackson. We thought with the House settlement and all the way those things are unfolding, it would be good to get a Missouri Valley Conference perspective on all that's going on. And Commissioner Jackson, you started in March of 2021 at the Missouri Valley Conference. Are things played out the way you thought they were going to way back in March of 2021?
Well, I think that's a loaded question. So, yeah, it's certainly a new world. I think all of us and it was quite a transition in the commissioner space in that 2021, 2022 years, and I think we're all still drinking from that fire hose because things have evolved so rapidly. The relationship that we now have between ourselves and our student athletes is very different. How we're interacting with campuses, how we're looking at financing, how we're looking at staffing, all those things have changed because of the House settlement and NIL and the transfer portal. And we can probably name a host of other variables that would fall on that list. So very different from what we anticipated, but still very exciting. It's good to be engaged, and we're certainly engaged because every day something new seems to be on the horizon. But I'm fortunate to be in a conference that has the type of leadership that we do have in the Valley, whether you're talking about the CEO room or whether you're talking about the athletic director's room. I'm very fortunate to be working with the people that I do.
I don't know if you noticed, you probably can't see it. My head's in the way. We have the exact same picture over our shoulders there about magical basketball happening in
Yeah.
St. Louis. I want to talk magical quickly. How magical was it for Murray State to make it to the baseball World Series? That's not what I'm covering, but it's got to be special for the league.
Well, it was great. I mean, one, selfishly, I got to check one of those bucket list items because I had always wanted to have an opportunity to get up to Omaha for the College World Series. Never had the time or the inclination, just to do it. And having Murray in Omaha, it was fantastic. I can't say enough about the village that Bob Jackson and Nico Yanko are building down there, and how it has impacted the Valley in such a positive way, but more importantly, how it's impacted their institution. Dan Skirker, what he's done with those student athletes, what they were able to experience, not just in their travels to Omaha, but I had the chance to be in Oxford and to be in Durham for when they were able to win those games and move on in the baseball championship. It's an incredible run. It's an incredible journey. And just happy that those kids are having that experience and happy that they're part of the Missouri Valley Conference. So it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
So exciting what they were able to accomplish. I wanted to talk to you about the House settlement, and we all have heard the numbers in all of the media reports. $20.5 million the big schools can now pay, and $2.8 billion in back pay to the former athletes. So kind of two questions as it relates. Where is that money coming from in general? And if Missouri Valley schools opt in, where does that money come specifically as it relates to Missouri Valley Conference programs?
Well, first, the House settlement is not a new proposition for us. This is something that in the conference space we've been talking about for the last year and a half. So we've been prepping our board, prepping our athletic directors since last at our last spring meetings that we had in Chicago prior to this year's spring's meetings
Hmm.
in St. Louis about what they would be expecting there. And the way that the money is coming is every year the NCAA gives a distribution for a host of different items to the conference office or to the institution that comes directly from the NCAA. Some of it comes from winning games in the NCAA tournament. Some of it comes from academic performance. There's a host of line items that make up those monies. And what they've done in the case of each conference, depending upon their success in the NCAA tournament, they've come up with a formula for subtracting from that distribution the necessary liability for the House settlement. So it's not the Missouri Valley Conference quote unquote taking money of our coffers and paying in to the house settlement. It's a deduction in the distributions that we would normally get per annum from the NCAA tournament. And our deduction over a 10-year period is going to be a little bit under $4 million. I'm sorry, $40 million. Okay, so you can
So for
obviously
a year,
divide
right?
that by 10,
Right.
and that is the amount that is being deducted from our conference distribution that we would share with the membership.
That's not small dollars. And so I guess the schools would have previously been budgeting for that. And like you said, we've been talking to them in advance so that we're already starting to think that direction. But that those are significant losses of the monies they were expecting to have.
No question, and we're all doing different things, and the conference office obviously is not immune to that. We're all doing different things, whether it's to be quite honest, contracting, contracting staff, whether
Mm.
it's looking at ways to be more efficient in how we run our championships, whether it's being more efficient in how you travel. We're all looking at things to figure out how to mitigate that loss, and then you couple it with the new NIL environment in which how we interact with our student athletes in terms of their compensation for either their licensing or if you're participating in a rev share. So all those things coming together at once, obviously makes it an extremely challenging environment. And, it's not an easy task. And we have a lot of empathy for what's going on our campuses. And we're trying to do the best we can to inform them of the different items, the different options, the different variables in play.
I think Southern Illinois the other day announced that they're opting in. What's the pro and the con for opting in or not opting in for the individual programs?
I think the best way to say simply in layman's terms is that if you opt in, you simply have more flexibility and less scrutiny in how you're
Mm,
able to interact with your student athletes when it comes to your choice of compensation for their NIL or their licensing. Okay. If you don't opt in and you go through a third party, anything that you do through that third party will eventually be subject to scrutinization by, as people are starting to get familiar with, the College Sports Commission and what we call their clearinghouse.
right.
And so one side you have more flexibility, one side because again you don't have to give an explanation for how you choose to compensate for those items that I spoke to. Where if you opt out, everything you do could be, and again I want to put air quotes around
Sure.
could be subject to some type of scrutinization. I think for many of our schools, Harry, the line prior to a month ago wasn't really about how they were going to compensate. It was much more about the fact that since there was not the grandfathering of current athletes on their campus who may have been above the proposed roster limits that are also part of the house settlement, it was putting them in a situation where they would have to cut athletes, and that could obviously have a disparaging impact not only on the student athlete experience but also on enrollment on their campuses. So the fact that Judge Wilkins came back and the A4, who are the defendants, came back and came to a solution for the grandfathering has probably led to a lot more schools making the decision to opt in versus opting out than maybe would have been the case 3 or 4 months ago.
NIL is the buzzword around college basketball. Well, prior to house settlement has become the buzzword now. How has NIL or how will NIL change as we move forward into the application of the settlement?
Again, I think the biggest change is that prior to July 1st of this year, all NIL was pretty much coming from an outside source, a third party. Now the campuses will be able to make decisions and implement that themselves if they
Mm,
so choose, which again, I think probably makes people feel a little bit more comfortable with the relationship that they have with their student athletes. Certainly, it provides a lot more security from a consumer protectorism vantage point because not every deal that was agreed upon was being sincerely managed.
sure.
So I think I, I think there are a lot of pluses to opting in. As I said, I think for a conference like ours, the biggest challenge wasn't the concept of opting in because of the relationship financially with the student athlete. It was much more about the roster management issue.
When they talk about the $20 million or whatever it can be, it's 22% of their all the different math equations I've been trying to learn. How does the initial scholarship money, the initial benefit of receiving a college basketball scholarship, factor into that equation, or is it part of it at all?
Well, in all candor, Harry, when you're talking about the 20.5 million, and again, the way they kind of calculated that, and I don't want to go through the whole drawn out math, but if you look at the NFL model, if you look at the NBA model, if you're looking at those type of situations, when you look at total gross income that is split between ownership and playing personnel, it's a little over 50% that goes to the athletes. In the collegiate space, that 20.5 is a derivative of if you start adding scholarships and training and all the things that come up, all those things, you get really close to that 50% number. So that's why that number is at 20.5. Harry, no school in the Missouri Valley is ever going to hit 20.5. No school outside of A4 is probably going to hit 20.5. So it's really not part of our equation. It's there's no desire to try and figure out that Drake or Bradley or Illinois State, they're not sitting there trying to figure out how they're sharing 20.5. Institutions are going to make decisions based on what they think they need to do to be competitive based on the market that is being established for the student athletes that they are recruiting.
How close do you think we are to the basketball player at Drake becoming an employee of the university, unionization of players, long-term contracts between players and universities? We're heading, it seems like we're heading that direction.
I actually don't think we're very close to student athletes becoming employments at all, becoming employees at all. I think the House settlement is something that gives us a chance to really keep us out of that genre, so to speak, because none of our institutions want to be in that type of a relationship with their student athletes. I think the key, the next piece, as much as there's been conversation about the House settlement, and it is a very important step, but Harry, what I would tell you is a very important first step.
Hmm.
Second step to this is we do need some legislative relief. We do need some safe harbor. We do need the ability to be in a position where we can enforce our rules without always ending up in court because we make a decision about how long a student athlete can play or compete in the college space, or we make a decision about what the relationship in terms of time should be between a student athlete and the institution. So the House settlement is the beginning of helping us get our arms around these issues, but it is just a step. It is just a beginning. We still have more to go, and a lot of that is going to be centered about whether or not we can actually get congressional help.
Arenas of concern for many people like myself, fans and people that care about the sport, our particular sport, but sports in general. Um, where to how do academics fit in all of this? And as we continue to move towards this, I don't want to call it pay for play, but that's kind of what it feels like. Uh, are the players still going to end up with a good education? I guess my question is: there's so much movement, and it's very difficult for these athletes to complete their education.
They will in the Missouri Valley. We just had one of our best years when it came to the academic success of our student athletes, and we're very proud of that. We don't think the idea that our student athletes are now able to take advantage of their NIL, which is a concept that we embrace,
Hmm.
means that you're not still holding them to the same type of accountability academically. We are not seeing a dip in graduation in our conference. Now, what I would say is certainly there have been some aspects that have helped that. Student athletes have been in college for a longer period of time, take advantage of the COVID year. Those type of things have been in play, but I think there still is the same level of sincerity and desire to make sure that the student athlete experience is exactly that. It's a student athlete experience, and our schools are striving very hard to get that done. I don't see any waning there on that topic, and I think many of us are doing everything we can to protect ourselves from being in that situation.
And the Missouri Valley Conference is a proud conference in that regard. And in the academic side, I think it's always been like that. The other cautions, concerns I think that fans have is about both Olympic sports and women's sports, because so much of this money at the A4 level is going to college football, college basketball, and the rest being neglected because the Missouri Valley is not in that A4 situation. Do you feel like that threat is the same or different for Olympic sports and Title IX women's sports?
Well, we haven't seen that manifests itself in any fashion in our league. We have not seen a deduction or a change in the approach towards how we treat volleyball or baseball or tennis or soccer. Or matter of fact, we're, as we spoke about at the onset of this podcast, we're doing very well in baseball. We're doing very well in volleyball. We're doing very well in those items, and I expect that to continue. So, look, there's always been tiering. Okay, that the idea that the tiering of sports is somehow a new concept isn't accurate. Now, there may be some situations where it's a little bit more pronounced, but there's always been tiering. And in our conference, let's face it, basketball's always been the most important thing.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that we're not mindful, we're not hopeful, and we're not responsible to making sure that our student athletes and the other sports that we hold championship for. As a matter of fact, in the last 2 years, we've added 2 championships to our coffers. So I don't, we haven't encountered that. I don't envision that happening. And we are still considering ourselves to be in a position where we're providing a very broad student athlete experience here at the Missouri Valley.
We hear the rumors of those kinds of problems, though, at the A4 level, where they're going to be spending a ton of money on those bigger dollar sports and maybe neglecting the others. I want to shift to basketball just for a little bit, and I'll let you go.
Hmm.
Very excited about Ryan Miller coming to Murray State and Eric Henderson coming to Drake. Talk about just the basketball side of all that we're seeing. I think the league is in a very great spot in this particular hour.
Well, 2 home run hires. We're all familiar with the success that Eric had at South Dakota State. I remember being in Omaha 2 years ago, watching his team, play against Kansas, and you knew how good of a coach and how great of a program he had built with South Dakota State. And matter of fact, I was just with Ryan up in Omaha because he was also there for the College World Series, and certainly coming from Creighton, he knows that community very, very well. And, he's gotten off to an unbelievable start down in Murray. And I think that's what the Valley is. We have great villages, and we have a great commitment to the student athlete experience. And so it's no surprise that we would hire 2 coaches of that quality into our league. But we're excited about the upcoming season. Last year, obviously, the success that Drake had, that just created a lot of excitement. And I think one of the great things about the Valley right now, Harry, is that there's a lot of hope right now in our conference. Certainly, we can all
I
point
agree.
to all the things that are going on that are extremely challenging in the athletic space, from the house settlement to transfer portal, all those type of things. But then when you look up and you've got teams winning games in the NCAA tournament, you got teams going to the College World Series, you got teams winning like Northern Iowa did in the volleyball championship, beating a program like Illinois. You've got so many good things going on. I think just like anything, our board and our athletic directors see the ROI. They can see it tangibly, and I think it permeates to the type of experience that our student athletes are having.
ROI, very important term that you just used. And we, even though the distributions are maybe a little diminished, getting a second or third team into the NCAA tournament, very important. And I know that you have begun, I think a year ago, to push some scheduling. I don't know if mandates is the right word for the basketball programs, but talk about your role in helping our college teams, our men's basketball teams, schedule in a way that will help them with the net and all the different things that are helpful to getting into the NCAA tournament.
I'm not sure how vibrant my role is. I think maybe I'm a good listener, or I'm a good facilitator if a request is made. But the one thing that's great about our league is that our coaches know where they are. And whether it's a Ben Jacobson or Brian Wardle, some of the more seasoned coaches in our league, they have always been aggressive about trying to play quality non-conference schedules in order to enhance their opportunity to either get a good seed in the NCAA tournament or put us in a position where we would have an opportunity for a second bid. So, certainly there are concepts and ideas that we share with the coaches in both genders, in regards to things that we think would help assist us in being better positioned to make those type of things happen. But it's nice to be with a group that is aggressive on their own in
Yeah.
terms of trying to make those things happen. So I think most of that weight goes to the coaches in the fact that they know they represent institutions that are proactive, aggressive, and very invested in what they want to do in the basketball landscape.
Illinois State won the whatever that tournament was, the CBI or whatever it was. There's
Mhm.
excitement around that program because they brought their stars back. Northern Iowa brings 11 guys back, as well as their new recruits and so forth. I expect just an outstanding basketball season. And I'm no expert, but when I evaluate the new players that have come in as well, I think it's the most solid group that we've seen in a bit.
Yeah, it's funny, we were 10th 2 years ago. And, I remember I may have been having a conversation with you, and everybody was lamenting about how many guys had left the league and moved on to other places. And guess what? We finished in top 10 again and then won a game in the tournament. And again, what our fan base, everybody has to get into, it goes back to that saying, what's more important? Is the name on the front of the jersey, or is the name on the back of the jersey? Well, we're now in a world where you're going to have to really pay attention to that mantra, because it is the name on the front of the jersey that matters. Because that name on the back of the jersey is probably going to change a little bit more often than we would like. But I just think the commitment that we have when it comes to our administrators, it provides us the opportunity to do the type of things that we did last year. I think in the last 2 years, we've been in those conversations about being a multi-bid conference. I think there's some things on the horizon that may make that even more likely. And so we're excited about what in our men's basketball and in our women's basketball, our coaches have been able to do when it comes to replenishing or creating the type of roster they need to be competitive.
Has done a great job. Talking about women's basketball, you began your rotation of the women's basketball tournament, and last year you were at Evansville. Talk about how you felt that went and the continuing of that rotation, but how did Evansville go at an ROI level, an excitement level, but also was it successful for the league and in a business kind of way?
Absolutely. We were extremely appreciative of the Evansville community. They took us to their heart. I think our student athletes had a tremendous experience. It was probably a perfect timing, considering that our championship game ended up being between Belmont and Murray State, two
Mm.
programs that are in the Southeast. When you look at the geography of our conference, so we had a great experience in Evansville, state of the art building. And we're looking equally to having the same type of experience this upcoming season when we're in Coralville, which right outside of Iowa City. So we've been really fortunate in terms of the opportunities that we've been able to have and provide for our women's student athletes when it comes to our basketball championship.
I'm not even going to ask you about expansion. I know that every time I talk to you, I always ask, "Where are we going to get another team? Will there be a new program?" I'm not even going to ask. I do want to ask how the scheduling will go. You're going to have an odd man out every time there's a scheduling situation in basketball. Now that we have 11 teams, how do you have a thought about how that scheduling will
Yeah, it's
fall
it's
out?
it's pretty simple. Obviously, now that we're playing 20 games with 11 teams, we'll be in a true double round robin on both sides. But there are now buys. So believe it or not, at having 11 teams versus 12 teams, you actually need more what we call data points to play your season. So in a 12-team conference, you only need 20. In a 11, you need 22 because you've got to buy every week.
Mhm.
So we're making the adjustment. We have always had Kevin Paga, who's one of the best schedule makers in the freaking world. Okay, yet alone the country. He assists us with this, and we'll come up with a fair way of doing it where it gets pretty complicated, because we want to look at, okay, make sure rest time is the same, because you won't have institutions, which has been a pretty common thing for the Missouri Valley. Everybody kind of has the same amount of rest time for each game. Well, that's not going to be the case anymore. So we're running the numbers and doing the metrics to make sure that the schedule is as fair and competitive as it can possibly be. but we will be in what we would call a true double round robin.
Excited about that, I think, for competitive balance. And then, like I said, the odd team out every rotation, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Before I let you go, just your sense of and I hear it in your voice, the trajectory of the Missouri Valley Conference, particularly in men's and women's basketball.
I think it's great. I'll be really surprised if we're not in the top 7 or 8 in the next 2 or 3 years. I just think the excitement on our campuses, the investment that our institutions are making, how important it is to our campuses. They're seeing again that ROI, whether it's Drake in basketball or Bradley in basketball or Murray State in baseball or Evansville in baseball. They're all seeing it, and I think because of that, the challenge is just embracing and understanding this new environment that we're going to be living in and making sure that the decisions we make are as good and as close to being the right decisions as we can possibly have. And that's what we're all working on and trying to figure out over the next few months.
I lied. One last question. You guys are hosting the first 2 rounds of the NCAA
Yeah.
tournament next year.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
It'll be great to have that back in St. Louis. And what does that do for the Missouri Valley Conference? What I mean is it does great for St. Louis, right? It does great for a guy like me that lives here. But what does that help in the Missouri Valley Conference overall?
Well, first, I think it's a compliment to our staff in that endeavor, especially led by Jack Watkins, that the NCAA trusts us with their most precious jewel. And I think it's a compliment to the city of St. Louis that it has been a more than convenient stop for the NCAA tournament. For us, it's a branding, marketing, promotion opportunity again to put the Valley front and center, which is why we put forth our best foot in trying to make that happen. So it's just an exciting time. It's exciting for the community. The fingers crossed, as you can imagine, Harry, is that you just hope that whoever comes is drivable. If it'll be great if all of a sudden we've got a Valley team, playing here in St. Louis, or and again, because it's a national event. If it's a Big Ten team, you love it if it's Illinois. Okay, if it's a Big 12 team, you love it if it's Kansas. Okay, because you have institutions that now will find St. Louis drivable. If it's the SEC, you love it if it's somebody like Missouri, and all those things help to create the type of synergy that you want for an event like that. But we're excited about hosting it, looking forward to doing it. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
Appreciate your time today. I know it's
happy to do it.
A time that's a little down. I don't think you ever have downtime, but I appreciate it because.
Well, if you want to say it's a downtime, you go ahead. But no one told me or my wife. So.
Have a great summer. Appreciate your time. That's the Commissioner, Jeff Jackson of the Missouri Valley Conference, and we're trying to wrap our heads around all the different things going on in college athletics. Jeff, thanks for your time.
No problem, Harry. You stay safe.
That's Jeff Jackson. You've been listening and watching to the Valley Hoops Insider podcast, part of the Valley Hoops Insider website. And remember, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.